Okay, welcome to the OTB channel. Today I'm going to do something that I very rarely do. I'm going to review a distro that's based on Gnome. And as you know, if you watch my channel, that's something I normally avoid. But I thought it was time that I give Pop! OS a second look. See you after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So, Pop! OS, why am I doing this? I normally avoid GNOME distros like the plague. And there's a reason for that. The first reason being, I just don't like the look and feel of vanilla GNOME. And the second reason is that I have an ideological objection to the code of conduct, which I think is very politically correct and woke, and I don't think there's any place for that sort of thing within software. So that's it in a nutshell. So why would I bother going and having another look at Pop! OS? Well, I've been looking at it over the last 6 months and kind of keeping up with the developments. I've only been watching reviews and doing reading. I haven't actually installed it. But they seem to be doing things quite a lot different from a vanilla GNOME experience by using lots of different extensions, to the extent that they now have something called their Cosmic Desktop. It's a desktop environment that's still built on GNOME, but it's very different. It's highly customized. However, they've acknowledged recently that they're going to have to move away from GNOME if they want to continue with the sort of customizations and plans that they have. And they're developing a new environment from scratch in Rust. Now, I'm really quite impressed at that. I think sometimes, there are only so many things you can do with what exists out there already, and sometimes you just have to do your own thing. And I'll be really keen to what they do as far as their Rust desktop is concerned. We don't expect it to dramatically change the look and feel of the Cosmic Desktop as it exists at the moment, but it's not going to be based on GNOME. And for me, that's a positive thing. So given all of that, I thought, well, let's go and have a look at Pop! OS. It seems to be quite popular. It's obviously in competition with Ubuntu, and it's based on Ubuntu as well, but they add their own repos. So what does it have to offer? Well, let's go and have a look at the website. Okay, so let me just adjust this camera slightly. You should be able to see the Pop! OS website in front of you now. And if I go to download, you get the option here to install a version that doesn't have the NVIDIA driver embedded in it already, or 2110, which is the standard one that I'm using. So if you have an AMD card or an Intel card, you'd install this first one. If you've got an NVIDIA card, well, go for it. Install the one that's already got NVIDIA there. I'm interested to see they actually do a Raspberry Pi version now as well. And that's something I may consider in the future. You've got your recommendations there, 4 gig of RAM, 16 gig of storage, which isn't bad at all. And the file size, 2.45 gigs. Okay, that's not bad at all. So you download whichever one you want. Now, a big question that a lot of people ask is, well, it's based on Ubuntu. Isn't Ubuntu and Pop! OS basically the same thing? And isn't Pop! OS just a reskinned Ubuntu? Well, that's what I originally thought, I must admit. But they have a little article here in their website that talks about the differences between Pop! OS and Ubuntu and how it's not just a reskinned Ubuntu. There's lots of different features, lots of extensions. They have their own repositories. They keep their own developed software up to date on a rolling basis rather than waiting for point releases. And the installer's different. You get an OEM installer rather than the standard Ubiquity when you first use it. And they make great play that it's easy to use for people new to Linux, but it's also very much for experienced Linux users and those people who require the sort of functionality. So, lots to use, lots to be impressed with, not just a reskinned Ubuntu. I suppose we'll see that when we launch it. And looking at the latest release announcement, which was POP 2110, I'd suggest they don't tend to track and release their latest distro in line with Ubuntu. It tends to be a little while after, but I'd suggest that they don't stick to Ubuntu's naming 2110, 2104, etc., if they want to differentiate themselves properly. And perhaps they will when they move to their Rust desktop environment. So what's actually happened? Well, in this new release, they make great play of talking about a new application window that comes up, and it moves away from that big full screen element. Better multi-monitor experience, apps alphabetically listed, just the right size. There's a Raspberry Pi preview available. They also offer a different kernel to Ubuntu. It's a pretty new kernel, and so it's going to have a lot more up-to-date hardware support than an Ubuntu release, which you'd sort of expect because essentially System 76, who produce this, are a hardware company. They also have a new refresh operating system there. I believe they actually have a recovery partition within Pop! OS, and if you need to reinstall the system, you can reinstall it from the recovery partition. I'm not sure whether that's just for System 76 hardware or for any hardware, but it's good to see something like that, just to make life easier. They've got their own hosted packages, which is great. They use a pop shop, a little bit like the Ubuntu shop, but it's their own, and it doesn't have snaps in it as standard. You can install Snap if you want, but as it stands, it relies on Debs and also on Flatpaks. I'm pleased to see them kind of sticking to Flatpaks and prioritising them. I think it's a little bit like the old situation we had many years ago with video formats. Do you choose VHS or do you choose Betamax? In the end, one format won out, and that was VHS, because the majority of people use that. The impression I'm getting at the moment is Flatpak is becoming more and more popular, and I wouldn't be surprised to see snaps disappear altogether at some point, even from Ubuntu. So anyway, read the release announcement and download Pop! OS and give it a try. I've downloaded a version into VirtualBox. I've never looked at 2104 outside this review, so I'm going to be exploring it with you live essentially, because I've not looked at it before. So I'll have to ask you to excuse me if I sometimes don't know where to go to do certain things. I'm not familiar with Gnome. I'm not familiar with Pop! OS. So this is a new user's view of what this particular distro is like. So without further ado, let's fire it up, see what it does. So here we are at the Pop! OS installation screen. Unlike a lot of distros, Pop does not boot up into a live distro. It goes straight to the OEM install, and after you've booted, this is the screen you're going to get. So it's defaulted to English, so let's just move along. United States, no, we don't want that. We want United Kingdom, so we'll select that and move onwards. English UK for the keyboard, yeah, I'm good with that. Default, yeah, absolutely. And what do I want to do? Do I want to do a clean install or a custom install? I see I also have the option here to try a demo mode, which I'm assuming boots into a live instance of Pop. Well, I'm just going to go for a clean install, and I'm going to select my hard drive and erase and install it. My full name, OTB, my username, exactly the same, an account password. The password is shorter than 8 characters. Okay, not a problem as long as it accepts it, and it does. Right, so I quite like the fact that it's given me the option to encrypt here, and encryption here seems to be set by default, with the encryption password the same as the user account password. Normally, I probably would encrypt on hardware, but I'm not going to bother on a virtual machine. It just doesn't seem worth it. And it's now installing. So we'll come back once it's done what it's done and see where it takes us. Okay, and we're back. And the installation took probably about 10 minutes, which is a little longer than I expected, but it was seamless. It didn't require any interaction. And I've rebooted and I get this welcome screen that's asking me to move on. So that's what I'm going to do next. Right, so typing. What do I want? I want English UK. It's already selected. Let's move on. How do I want the dock to look? I can choose no dock. Dock extends to the edges, which is how it's set at the moment. Or dock doesn't extend to the edges. Actually, I think I prefer that. So we'll set it up like that. Next, show the workspaces button, which we've got up here. Yeah, I'll keep that in, and show the applications button. Do I really need the applications button? I'm going to just keep it like it is for the time being. And where do I want the clock? Do I want it in the center? Let's just go with the defaults. Open and switch applications from a launcher. So press the super key or use an icon in the dock to display the launcher search field. So let me hit the super key. Okay, so that looks good to me. Use the arrow keys to quickly switch between open windows or type the name. Okay, fine. This is a bit of a how-to as much as anything else. So let me click next. Use gestures, how do you pronounce that? For easier navigation. So use a 4-finger swipe left to open workspaces and Windows Overview. 4 fingers swipe right to open applications. Okay, so this is obviously if you're using a touchpad. Let's go to next. Do I want dark or light theme? I'm really pleased it's defaulting to dark. I mean, let's have a look at what the light looks like. No, I'm blinded. We'll go back to the dark. Maybe it's just my old eyes, but I find it far nicer to look at in dark mode. Location services. Do I want applications to determine my geographical location? I like the fact it's switched off by default, and that's how I'm going to keep it. Time zone. Well, I'm already at the right place. So, yeah. Can I move on? Apparently not. If I just put UK, I tell you what, I'll just put London. And where are we? London. There we go. That'll do us. Next. Connect your online accounts. I'm going to skip that. And I'm all done. So, I see initially that I've got 3 updates here. So if I click on that, how do I actually do this? You have to remember, guys, that I'm not used to using Gnome at all, and I'm certainly not used to using one of these shops. So I'm just wondering how I get to the updates here in order to install them. Right, updates. So this has come up. Right. These sources show you how Pop! OS checks for updates. It's recommended to leave these sources enabled. Okay. What extra sources have we got? Well, we seem to have a couple of Pop OS repositories there, so that's good. Flatpak, do I want Flatpak there? It's using the Flatpak repo by default, but clearly it's not using snaps. There we go, update all. So Pop operating system updates, 59 components to update, Firefox and Popsicle. I'm going to click on this, guys. I'm going to let it update. I'll pause it while I'm doing this, and we'll come back in a second. Okay, so that's the updates done. Again, it was seamless, but it did take a little while to sort itself out. Nevertheless, I'm now at this desktop, which I really have no experience of using. I have looked at vanilla Gnome before, and it does feel very different from that. The thing that I like, and I'm just trying the different ways of doing this, right? The thing that I do like here is the fact that the application menu is very different. With Gnome, the standard Gnome, it's a full screen affair. And if I was to pick one feature of Gnome that I really dislike and turns me cold, it's that full screen menu. You might have heard me refer to it as the Teletubbies menu, because it really does feel like that. This feels so much better to have actually, just a smaller window. Is it movable? No, it doesn't seem to be, but hey. And we have all the different folders here, and I see that the apps are actually in alphabetical order. So it looks a lot more straightforward to navigate. I see also that we have an option to create our own folder. So let me just have a go. Let me create something called, Tools, Create. And I see we've now got a Tools folder. So if I was to move, let's move Screenshot into Tools. Okay, that works. So I do like that. I also noticed that when I was playing around with the welcome screen, if I hit the Windows key, I get like this Rofi, which I believe will not only bring up applications, but will also search for files. So if I do that, suddenly I've launched my terminal. And I can, of course, launch the terminal by, I'm presuming Super T? Yes. Okay, pretty much default. So, yeah, I like that. And you can access it either through the key binding or you can show the launcher. I have a show workspaces area there that shows me the different workspaces that I can move to. And I believe if I launch a window here, so let's just launch a terminal, I can actually drag a window to a particular workspace. I believe that I can also move workspaces by super control up or down. Yeah. There we go. And I should be able to see, no, I haven't got the workspaces shown as extra. Let's open something else. Let's open the Pop Shop. If I open the Pop Shop there, you can see the terminal still behind it. If I want to move that, I did Super and Shift, and it's moved it to the second place. If I wanted to move it back, Super Shift up, moves it back. Super Shift down, moves it back onto Workspace 2. So, Super Shift is how you send an application to a particular workspace. Super Control is how I actually switch workspaces itself. Okay, all good. I like that. It's not that it's particularly unusual to be able to do those sort of things. I have my own Mate desktop set up with custom key bindings so I can work my way around. But it's nice to see that it's fairly straightforward out of the box. Now, let's talk about this Pop Shop. I would tend to use just apt from a terminal to install things. However, I believe that the Pop Shop is a little bit different to your standard Ubuntu shop, which is, of course, based on snaps, not slaps as I called them earlier, snaps. And they have their own repository here. The first thing that I noticed was Alacrity is here. And Alacrity, as you're probably aware, is not available in Ubuntu, but it is provided by the Pop OS repositories. So if I click install to that, obviously I have to authenticate. Let's see how long it takes. It's downloading, it's running, and hopefully it's going to install. I do find that these shops, generally speaking, compared to just using the terminal for installing, do take a little longer. But hey, that's not really taken long at all. If I hit the Windows key, I can now open Alacrity. Okay, so all good. I'm happy with that. You've no doubt all seen the Linus Tech Tips where he tried to install Steam and it all went wrong. Well, let's try and do the same. I have the option there to install it from a deb or to install the Flatpak. By preference, I'll always install a deb file. I think Flatpaks are quite useful if debs aren't available, but if something in the native the native package format is available, I'm going to do that. I'll let that get on with it whilst we talk around this. So you've got your workspaces. You can bring the application menu up in a range of different ways, and you've got a Rofi type app searcher. And to be honest, even in the likes of Plasma or Mate or XFCE, I still use Rofi. So having something similar right from the word go makes sense to me. You've also, of course, got this tiling mode. Now, when I last looked at Pop OS, I think it was in May 2020, I was looking at this and evaluating it, and I think my overall conclusions were perhaps a little bit negative, and I don't think they should have been with hindsight, because you can enable hybrid tiling almost in many desktop operating systems, and it can be useful. I have my Mate set up so that I kind of use hybrid tiling at some points. But there's nothing wrong with it, and it's a good option there, and perhaps easier if you prefer everything to be in a tiling format. And I don't quite know why it's working like that. Let's have a look at the workspaces. Right, so if I'm on that workspace and I open something else like a file manager, there we go, we're into tiling mode. And you can obviously flick between which is the active and which isn't. There is quite a useful side to this tiling extension. You can toggle tiling on and off, and you can open up your Pop Shell keyboard shortcuts and kind of work your way through them, and it tells you how to move windows up one workspace, down one workspace. Let me just get rid of that so that we have the full page here. And toggle auto tiling, which is super wide. Let's try that. Okay, so it goes back into straightforward mode, or we go into tiling mode. Activate launcher. So what's that? Super /. Okay, and again, it brings up that little Rofi-like terminal, but actually the super key brings it up on its own anyway. Execute a command in a terminal. Well, let's go super /, and if I did T:, okay, you can now type the command to execute in a terminal. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on this tiling mode, other than to say did a full review of it last time. From what I've heard and from what I've read, it's been tweaked, and a lot of people are big fans of it. So it's a nice thing to have. I'm going to turn it off for now, and we will just come away from this. Right, so Steam has been installed. So if I type Steam now and try and launch it, it's downloading an update, and I've never used Steam in my life, but clearly it seems to be working, so we're all good. I'm just going to cancel that. Right, so let's have a look at the settings. I think as an interim conclusion about this, when I tried it 18 months ago or whatever it was, I think the interface looked a lot more similar to vanilla Gnome. I don't like vanilla Gnome, as I've already said, but this looks different enough to get away from some of the main issues that I had. I do like having this panel in the bottom. I might move it to the top and move it around if that's possible. I don't know if it is. But it makes much more sense to have something like that on a desktop. I like the fact that I can do tiling if I want to. I appreciate why they've put that in. I like the shortcuts to be able to move windows to different workspaces and to instantly move to a workspace. But the biggest thing is that I think that is the application menu is a great improvement. In the settings, well, I'm sure we just have the normal stuff here. So we've got our network, Bluetooth, our desktop. Let's have a look at our desktop, where we can set our super key to do particular tasks. So we can have it launch the launcher, which I've got there now, or we could set it to perhaps open the workspaces. Let's have a go. And there we go. Okay, I'm going to stick to the launcher, I think. Or we could have it simply set to just open up the application menu. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. Okay, I do like the flexibility of this. Enable top left hot corner for workspaces. That's not something I would ever use. I know when I used GNOME 3 in the early days, it was something that used to annoy me. Show a workspaces button, show an applications button for the top bar. Okay, so you don't have to have these up here. You can remove them. I can get rid of the workspaces bar. Date and time, where do we want that? We've got it in the center at the moment, and we can choose whether or not to have minimize and maximize buttons. I'm going to have a maximize button as well. What about backgrounds? Let's have a look. There's quite a few here, actually. Yeah. I'll be honest, Pop's, I'm going to minimize that. Pop's default theme isn't my favorite. It's a little bit cartoony, but you choose what you choose. It's only a wallpaper at the end of the day, and nobody should actually make a decision about a distro based on a wallpaper. What other options have we got here? What about this one? Okay, I quite like that. That's quite a nice wallpaper. Appearance. We can choose between light and dark. There is all of our options for the dock. Do we want it always visible? Do we want it to IntelliHide? Do we want a small dock? Let's have a look how small is. Actually, I think I probably would go with a small dock, or we can set a custom size. Okay, and where do we want it? Bottom of the screen, left side, right side, not the top, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. Then workspaces, do we want them to be dynamic, or do we want to set a fixed number? And where do we want the workspace picker, left or right? So very flexible. Your standard sort of stuff from here. So the settings menu, all good. Just wanted to try something. I have this panel at the bottom. I presume I can just drag apps to it if I want. And yes, it would seem that I can. So I've just dragged the Steam to it. And if I want to remove it from favorites or put it into another particular place, I just get rid of it. Steam has been removed from my favorites. So I'm not unimpressed so far. It feels a lot more intuitive than a standard GNOME desktop does to me. And I feel that given some time, I could probably get used to it and I could live with it. Of course, we're not stuck with Gnome or this cosmic desktop. We can, because basically it's Linux and it's drawing from the Ubuntu repos. We can change the desktop environment if we want. And I believe Pop does give some instructions for that. So change desktop, Pop OS. Let's see if we can bring it straight up. And let me maximize this. How to change. Okay. So the Pop desktop, which we've currently got, if you wanted to make a change, I wouldn't advise that you attempt to remove Pop desktop itself. It's an integrated part of the distro and you may cause a lot of damage. Having said that, there's nothing to stop you actually installing something like Mate. And all you would do, well, there you are. It gives you the commands that you'll need to put in. So let me open a terminal here. And if I do a sudo apt update, just to make sure that we're all where we need to be in terms of syncing, I'll put in the command to install Mate, and let's see where we get to. Sudo apt install Mate desktop environment extras, and Ubuntu Mate themes. So let's see what happens. Do I want to continue? Yes. I'll just pause it for a second while it does what it needs to do. Okay, and it's finished. I have to say that running this command from the terminal has made me realise just how much faster Pac-Man is. It really is. But nevertheless, everything's gone fine. Now, according to that website article, I either need to reboot now or to restart GDM. So I'm going to do a system CTL, restart, GDM, and we'll see if we can get into the Mate desktop. And here we go, we're at the Mate desktop. We have the menu here. What menu is that? Let's have a look at the About menu. It's the Brisk menu that's been installed from by default, which I haven't got too much of an issue with. System tools. Let's have a look at system tools. You've got all the standard stuff there, and I presume you also have the Pop Shop. Yes, you do, which I can get on and launch here. Okay, what you're not going to get, though, is all the little key bindings that work with the Pop Cosmic desktop. So if I hit the Windows key, the super key, I'm just going to get the standard menu. I'm just going to open up a terminal here, and I'm just going to install HTOP, because I want to see what Mate is running in this and compare it to the Pop desktop, Cosmic. So HTOP. Right, it's running at 1.16 gigs, which is not necessarily that bad, but it's certainly not lightweight. But to be fair, Pop isn't intended to be a lightweight distro for older hardware. In many ways, it's designed for the latest hardware that you can get. Let's just come out of here. I'm going to go back to Pop OS. Let's launch a terminal and do a HTOP from here. 958 megs. It's actually lighter than the Mate instant there. Like I said, it's not designed for low-spec hardware, this really. So around a gig, pretty much what you'd expect. Okay, not meant to be an in-depth review, just a bit of a first look, really, to see what they're doing. Let's go and have a chat. Right, so that's Pop OS. What conclusions would I come to? Well, I wouldn't change my conclusion about not being particularly interested in using a desktop environment as opposed to my window managers. And from what I've seen so far, it wouldn't persuade me away from the likes of Mate or XFCE. However, the look and feel of the Pop desktop, the Cosmic desktop, is much better than vanilla Gnome. And I think I could learn to like it. I do like its features. I do prefer its look and feel much more to the vanilla Gnome desktop. And they seem to be making great strides and moving in the right direction. And for that, lots of kudos to System 76. I think I'm probably a bit dyed in the wool now in terms of I like a rolling release. So I would be unlikely to go back to a point release anymore. It's not that I've got anything against the Deb package manager, Debian testing, etc. I think is fine, but I'd rather not be stuck in a point release anymore. And I do prefer Pacman; it's so much faster. Having said that, there's nothing wrong with Debian-based distros. I have a lot of respect for them. I use Debian on my web server. And if you come away from GNOME, I do think Ubuntu Mate is one of the nicest implementations of a Mate desktop. In terms of being able to install other desktop environments in POP, yes, you've got that function. Of course you have. They're not going to be developed like the specific Ubuntu Mate, Ubuntu, and what do you call the Ubuntu version that comes with KDE, Kubuntu. So you're going to have to do a lot of work yourself probably to get it to the way that you want it, and you're going to lose a lot of the POP features that are very much tied into the Cosmic desktop. Nevertheless, good job. The GNOME desktop, as it should be, I certainly think it's going in that direction, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with their Rust development. So that's it for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to support the channel, well, you know where I am in terms of my Facebook group. You know that I've also got a Patreon page. If you'd like to make a contribution, please do so. Just as these wonderful people have that you can see on the screen now. Other than that, though, guys, that's it for today. See you next week and have a great weekend.